You're listening to a BGE podcast.
Friends and family gather round and fire up the barbecue. Let the smoke waft and float, that's what we're gonna do. You can't deny there's nothing like...
Welcome back to another episode of the Blind Grilling Experience. We've got a special guest, Miss Chef Debra Erickson from The Blind Kitchen joining us today. And we've got lots to talk about, recipe to share with you as well. Stay tuned.
Under the sun of the stars, fire is burning, the world keeps turning. Don't worry what you gotta do, 'cause if you're looking, you ain't cooking. Fire up the barbecue. Fire up the barbecue.
Welcome back, folks. My name is Chris Peltz. I am the most interesting griller in the world. And today we've got one of the most interesting chefs in the world, Miss Debra Erickson with theblindkitchen.com. How you doing, Chef Debra?
I am doing excellent, Chris. Thank you for having me back. I always enjoy my time with you.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. And you've had a lot going on, a lot of updates with not only product and things on the website, but you're getting pretty famous, some recognition around the world here.
We did get I'm not sure famous even comes close to it, but we are very honored and proud to have received the Audio Description Project Award for an individual for audio description from the American Council of the Blind. We were shocked and honored, and just it feels really good to be recognized for work that we're doing that we don't have to do. But
Yeah.
that's what the Blind Kitchen does. It wants to be as accessible to anyone on the vision spectrum, no matter where they are. And that was really nice external validation.
Mm-hmm.
I get goosebumps again.
Yeah. Well, and last time you were on, I mean, I went on. I think I went on a little bit about the beginning of your videos with the little the muffins or cupcakes jumping in the muffin pan and the audio description that goes with it and just the whole, they're whistling and saying, come on, and just making the braille dots for TBK, the Blind Kitchen. I'm impressed. I was impressed then. I'm still impressed today. I love listening to it. And I think it is well-deserved. And it's awesome. I really do.
Well, thank you. Edgar Garcia Chavez of Nayo Creations. He is my videographer, and I have to give all the credit to him for how it turned out, how it all came together. I understand it's very time consuming, but he nailed it.
Yeah, he did. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And that's cool that it was, it was recognized by ACB. It's one of those things, especially when you have groups and organizations that are looking at and pushing for audio description and things and recognizing those who are taking the time to really put that into practice. I do think it's important. It's a great thing, and with what you guys did, it was well deserved, no doubt. So,
well, thank you. As a blind consumer, audio description means the world to me.
Yeah.
I just feel if something's audio described, I am just so grateful, and I feel so much more included. I hope more people and more people do it, and I think they are, even on Hulu and Prime, stuff like that. There's more audio description available. It's very nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. Now, that's not the only thing that you've got going on, though, because you've been adding a lot of things, not just product, but also the videos and recipes and blog posts, different things to your website. And so that's been growing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since we talked about it on the last podcast we did, but the collection wasn't out yet. It's a grilling and barbecue collection, and it has 10 different tools specifically designed to make a grilling experience safer, easier for people with vision loss who like grilling. And there's a lot of us out there.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, absolutely. And now you already had, and one of the things that I push is heat-resistant gloves. You already had a pair of heat-resistant gloves on your website, just in your normal, cooking and kitchen groups and things that folks could purchase. But you added a second pair of gloves to the grilling collection, right? And what's the difference? Just so folks know, if they're looking at your website and they see the two different sets of heat resistant gloves, what's the difference?
Okay, so the first one we already had was called the heat glove, and it is 4 fingers and a thumb. So it's very flexible, and it has silicone designs on it so that when you're reaching to grab a pan out of the stove or a hot casserole dish, the silicone not only serves to protect you from the heat of the pan, but it also has a non-skid function. So when you go to reach under that heavy pan, unless it's really greasy on the
Mhm.
outside, you're going to be able to grab them. Both sets of gloves have those same properties, but the difference between the heat gloves and the grilling gloves is that the heat gloves stop at your wrist, because in the blind kitchen, we advocate that you never put your arms in the oven. There's no reason to. You can just put your fingers around the front of the rack while you're wearing the heat gloves and pull the rack out, pull the food out to you to work with it.
Yeah.
I have I have war scars on my forearms from reaching into the oven, believe me.
Hmm.
But now I just don't do that. I just bring the rack halfway out to me, and then now there's no need for my arms to be in the oven. So with the grilling gloves, however, you have to reach over hot coals or flame or whatever when you're outside. There's no pulling a rack to you when
Right.
you're grilling. So these run about 5 inches up your forearm and provide extra heat protection, so you don't burn the hairs on your arm as you're
Yeah. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you're handling your hot food on the grill. So
Right.
that's the difference between the two of those.
Yep, absolutely. And the dexterity and everything is the same. They're great for that. The dexterity is very good. You can still feel things really well, plus the protection that you get. So that they both work really, really good. I've got both sets. I like them. And you're right. With the oven, I actually had another guest on a while back, and he has heat resistant gloves on his website, but I was telling him the difference, and of course he cited, but he was like, well, that wouldn't you want longer gloves, for reaching into the oven? And then that's when I told him, I was like, no, because when you're blind, you pull things out, you never reach in. He's like, he never thought about, that being the case. And so, yeah, it was one of those things. A lot of times folks don't think about it. And sometimes even if you're blind or visually impaired and you have sighted parents growing up, they oftentimes will reach in. They didn't pull the racks out.
Right, right.
And so that's how they would teach you to do it. Just be careful. Don't raise your forearms too high or burn, and hit the top of the inside of the stove, and like you said, you do it a few times, you learn that lesson. But yeah, when you actually have some training from those who are blind or visually impaired like you, who know what they're doing and know some of those little tips and tricks, it can make a big difference when it comes to safety, for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing, it about cooking or grilling blind, it takes more time. So when you're pulling that casserole dish out of the oven or the cake pan, it's an extra step to pull that rack out. If you're
Hmm.
just reaching and grabbing the pan, that's one, and put it on top of the stove, that's one step. Now you've got to pull the rack out, grab the pan, make sure you've got it safely, because you can't use your eyes to make sure
Yeah.
you've got it right. Move it up to the top of the stove. Then you've got to reach down, push the rack back in before you can close the door. So I don't hurry when I'm cooking.
Right.
That's when stuff happens. Stuff spills. You get hurt.
Hmm.
I get disorganized. I'm very much for telling people, allow yourself plenty of time so you can enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Yeah, and it is something that we should be able to enjoy. And along with those things, one tip that I would highly recommend is always know what your next step is before you do it. Right? So like you say, you pull that out, you grab that casserole dish. Well, and then all of a sudden you're holding this dish and you've got a pot that is cooking on the front burner, and something on the counter next to the stove, and you're like, oh no, where am I going to put this thing? Right? Know where you're
Right,
going
right.
with it when you grab it, and
That's
make
a
sure
good
that the
point.
spot is clear and ready for you, so you can set it down and you can go through all of those steps safely. So But yeah, trust me, I've been caught with a pan in my hands. Like, what do I do now?
What was I thinking?
So, yeah, absolutely. So, but definitely little things like that, I think sometimes can make a big difference for someone who, they can think back as like, oh yeah, been there, done that, or they're wanting to get into cooking more. They're wanting to do it more, and as they jump into this venture in the kitchen or at the grill, they hear some of these little things that they hadn't thought of before, and it just helps them as they go on their journey.
Yeah, yeah. And one other thing I want to plug for the website is our recipe section.
Hmm.
We don't have a whole lot of recipes on there yet, but what we do have, I've written them in a way that really helps a blind person to cook. The logical steps, like most of the time, depending on what the recipe is, I'll have them fabricate all the produce, any fresh herbs or produce before they go to the protein. So that way they don't have to clean their cutting board to cut fresh produce if they've
Oh yeah, yeah.
done the chicken first. So I go through and I say, this is what you should do the steps in this order and set it aside or whatever. And that way the recipe comes together. I've already thought all those steps out for people.
Yeah.
I love doing those, but they take forever. But then I use them.
Yeah, right, absolutely. And that, we just launched our website, blindgrilling.com, and we have a recipes page, and we've got, at least at the time of this record, we got 4 recipes that are up there right now. But with that said, I did not do that. What you did, what you're talking about. I just like, here's what you need, here's what you do, now go do it. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's how most of them are.
that's
What
right.
we have.
Yeah.
We also insert a but like a blind tip
Yeah.
uh, to make it easier to do if you have vision loss. And the
Mhm.
other is what tool you need to
Right.
do that
Yeah.
particular step of the recipe. So if you don't need the tool or you have one that works for you, great. But if you don't, that kind of guides you in the right direction.
Sure. Yeah. Which is awesome. So theblindkitchen.com. All right, we're going to be plugging that as we go throughout the episode today, because I definitely want folks to go over and check it out, especially with the recipes and like you're saying with what you've got on there and how you have it organized is each recipe is good for everyone, but especially for those who are blind or visually impaired and getting started. And with the way you've laid out the steps is awesome. So I
Thank you.
need to take that note and try to implement that. But we're new to the website game, and so it's and we're doing it ourselves. So we're learning. We'll see how it goes.
It's like everything. It just takes time, and you
Mhm.
got to treat it like a job. You just got to keep coming back, coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, along with that, with the website, like you said, you've got several new items in the grilling collection. There's a few that I want to highlight, and we've mentioned over the past few episodes and going back a few weeks because I've had a chance to use several of them. And the one that I've probably have had the most questions about lately and have pushed hard more than any other is going to be the talking thermometer, because I get questions about probes and instant read thermometers all the time. And, that is one that every kitchen needs an instant read thermometer, sighted or unsighted, non-sighted, whatever. That is key for several reasons. But you have an absolutely affordable option on your website when it comes to an instant read thermometer.
Yeah, it is loud. It's clear. Um, it runs on batteries. The only thing is about the style of thermometer we have. First of all, it's instant read. The minute you press the button, it's going to tell you what the temperature was the second you press the button, even if it's not finished climbing all the way to what the temperature really is. So you got to wait. I count to 7, and at that point, I put it through the meat and then come back halfway. So I make sure that the tip of the probe is not touching the pan
Mhm.
or the grill, that it's actually in the center of the meat, especially if it's poultry. And then I count to 7 and then press the button. And I do it in at least 3 different places on the meat. Just I don't want to poison my friends
Yeah,
or
sure.
family
Yeah, yeah,
or make them sick. So
yeah.
that I'm very, very careful. But it's very accurate as long as you press it at the right time.
Yeah. And you can press it more than once, right? I mean, that's no big deal. So if you press it and it's reading and then, wait another couple seconds and press it again, and it will register that second time when you press it.
Yep, exactly right.
So, so you can keep track. But that is important when it comes to being able to know, especially meat, when things are done and when they're at the right temp. Or if you need to let it go a little longer or whatever the situation is, the thermometers are absolutely vital and important. And like I said, you've got one that is as good as any that's out there when it comes to the talking thermometers. And so, that's going to be a definite, great option for folks that are out there.
Thank you, Chris.
So you got that, you've got the gloves. I know let's see, you've included the corn cob brush in the grilling. Didn't you have that before, though?
I had the corn cob cleaner.
The cleaner, okay.
Just a tool that strips the kernels off the
Right.
corn. But the corn silk brush was new to the grilling
Okay.
grilling and barbecue collection. But
Okay.
every one there's 10 items in there, and they're all available separately, so
Yeah.
you can do it either way.
Right. Which is awesome because we've already started canning. We've been canning green beans. We just got some of our first tomatoes this past week, and of course, cucumbers and cabbage. Our cabbage has been massive. It's been awesome. So we've been really getting a lot of things coming in. The corn hasn't come on just yet. We're waiting on that, but definitely going to be using that silk brush for sure when we start getting that corn ready to put up and freeze. But the other thing that we've had a lot of questions come in about vegetables and kabobs. And so I wanted to talk about the skewers because last time you were on, you mentioned the skewers, but they weren't out yet. And and so now I want to talk about the skewers because you described them last time, but go ahead and describe them again. And then I want to get into the use of the skewers. I want to get into your idea recipe for maybe a marinade, and then how you do your skewers when you're getting ready to throw them on the grill.
Okay. Yeah. So our skewers are different in that if you have just a traditional skewer, whether it's a wooden skewer or just a steel rod or even a flat steel rod, sometimes, especially when you're cooking vegetables, as they cook, they steam, and the opening where that skewer is going through gets bigger. So you can actually be trying to turn, let's say, a row of cherry tomatoes on a skewer, and that skewer will just be spinning helplessly
Yeah.
inside the tomatoes, and that one part of it is still exposed to the heat source. Our skewers are about 11 inches long. The handle's about 5 inches long, and the rods are about 6 inches long. And there's 2 rods that come out from the handle. And the reason this helps is because if you put those 2 rods through a cherry tomato, there's no way you can't turn it. It has 2 points of contact, so it can't spin hopelessly in there. It's going to have to lift up and turn the whole row of cherry tomatoes or whatever you have. So that's a real nice feature of it, that you are going to know with 100% certainty that they're going to turn over.
Mhm.
The other nice thing about it is of course you'll know where your food is on the grill if you've got the handle hanging over the edge. That's always a nice thing about grilling when you can't see what you're doing. But there's also a little rectangular metal plate that runs between the handle and the skewers. And when you're ready to take the food off of the skewer, you actually push the little metal plate. So there's a protection between your fingers and the hot food. So that's a nice option too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that works really well for a couple of reasons. But I really like the double skewer aspect of it because again, like you said, when you're trying to flip some things, but even with our little trick that we've done on blind grilling when it comes to things like hot dogs and brats and running that through the ends perpendicular to the brats or the hot dogs, even with that second skewer, we're able to flip in one smooth motion, those hot dogs or brats, and that, with those particular skewers, they work really well for that also, which makes it really nice and easy for someone who's blind or visually impaired. Oh, excuse me. Rather than chasing hot dogs and brats with a pair of tongs, around a hot grill, you're able just to grab
Exactly.
that skewer and get them flipped, which is great. So,
Well, the other thing you were talking about vegetables.
mhm,
These double skewers, you can take asparagus and get it all trimmed and ready, and you can run these through. So you line
that's
up the
right.
asparagus, the tip facing left, then right next to it put another asparagus with the tip facing right. So now you've got this row raft of asparagus, and you run the skewer through the center of those rods, and you can flip them all at the same time.
Yeah.
And
Wow. Yeah.
asparagus are small, they can fall between the grill, so you do them perpendicular,
Hmm.
but this is a second protection of making sure they don't end up in your heat source.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That is great. And I hadn't thought about the asparagus because, yeah, I mean that's great. We've got these grill baskets. This like almost like a skillet, but it's got holes that we'll sometimes put vegetables in.
Mhm.
But then we've got to stir them around and do different things. But I really like the convenience of the skewers as well because you don't have food on top of one another. You know where how they're spaced and they're going to stay that way. So it's really good for keeping
Exactly.
track of things.
It's
So
predictable. And we have a grilling basket also in the blind kitchen, and it is about an inch deep. It's about, I'd say, I'm not sure, 12 inches wide and maybe 9 inches long. And it literally has a hinged lid. So you can also put food in that, and you can close up the lid and then you can turn it over and you'll know everything has been flipped and it's all contained safely in that basket. It does change the grilling marks. If you're that into the grilling marks, this isn't going to be the tool for you. But if you're just wanting to grill good, delicious food with a char on it a little bit for your family, it's a real nice way to help track food and keep things easy.
yeah. And it's one of those things, with this collection, there's so many options and so many things for people to think about that it's geared for those who are blind or visually impaired to help them to be able to do these things on their own and not ask for help, not ask someone to come out and, help make sure I've got this right or that right. The way everything is designed, the way you've got it set up is so that, we can do this independently.
Yep, yep. Let me tell you about another thing, Chris. I don't think you know about this, but I love this thing. I've got something called a bag holder. And what it is, it's made out of plastic and it's a disc that's about 4 inches around and it's got a non-skid bottom and you stick that on your counter. But then it has two arms that stick up kind of like bunny ears. They just go straight up. And you can take it has to be a freezer thickness bag, which I think is 1.7 millimeters. You don't want to use a produce bag or a wimpy bag. You want one that has a little bit of bulk to it. And then on the top of the little arms, there are little clips that inside, and they grab the center part of one side of the zipper of the bag, and then you put the other side of the zipper, and so they're facing out kind of like a V, so that opens that bag in front of you, and that bag is being held open. So when you're doing marinating, especially if you're working with raw proteins or something like that, where it's gross, you got to touch the bag to find out where it is. You've got
Yeah.
maybe you're
Yeah.
using some kind of sticky honey or maple syrup in your marinade or whatever. It can really be a mess. But with this, it holds the bag open and you never have to touch the bag. So when you're done putting the marinade in, putting the vegetables in or whatever, you can just go and, wash your hands in the sink and the outside of the bag and the top of the bag, it's all clean. It's
Wow. Yeah.
really nice.
Now,
And
go ahead, finish that, and
the
then I got a question about it.
Sure. So the other thing is like it holds a quart size. When the handles are when you first open it, the handles are about, I'd say, 5 inches tall. So you put your quart zipper bag in there. But if you want to use a gallon size, you can actually extend the rods. You pull them up and they just come up, 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 and now it'll hold a gallon size bag. So it's adjustable. And then when you're done with it, you clean it. It's made out of plastic, simple. You push the arms back down onto the base so it's small, and then they fold over so you can store it flat.
Wow. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah,
So
nice tool.
let me ask you this, because this is something that we run into with sous vide bags that we're going to vacuum seal, right? And sometimes
Oh,
when you're putting something into a sous vide bag, and then when you go to seal it, or just if you're going to vacuum seal anything, right? You
right,
run into
right.
the same problem where sometimes if you get, whether if you've seasoned something, or a little seasoning gets on that top opening, it won't seal, right, when we're sous vide. So we got to always clean off where we're going to put that in the vacuum sealer and run it through the vacuum sealer. Do you think if we had the bags cut to the right size, that it would hold like a sous vide type uh, bag open?
I am not sure. I know the thickness would be fine.
Yeah,
They're made with heavy duty plastic, but what the little handles kind of grip, they're just basically a U-turn at the top with little plastic ribs on it.
yeah,
So they actually hold that plastic zipper panel.
gotcha.
So I don't know if it would be enough of a clasp on
Yeah.
if you don't have that zipper panel.
Well, I'm gonna
I'll send you
test
one,
it.
Chris.
I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna test it and find out, because that would be something that I never knew I needed until you just described it. It's like,
Oh,
he's like, man, I wish I could get this done without doing this, but I never even thought. I wonder if they make a tool to hold this open like that. And
it gives you an extra pair of hands.
that's right, it does. Absolutely, that would be awesome. But that definitely with Ziploc bags, um, especially when we do a lot of. In fact, just this past episode, we talked about grilling up chicken for different recipes, and then using leftovers. When you go to put those leftovers, in a Ziploc and store them, then I mean that would be, yeah, you get it all sliced up in there. If it's already seasoned, rather than getting all that, and getting it to where, because sometimes the zipper won't, anything gets in there, it keeps it from sealing
Right, right,
properly. And so that
right.
would be great. That would be
Yeah,
great.
pulled pork, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Anything
Yeah.
that's saucy, that
Yeah.
it frees up the bag, so
Hmm.
it keeps things cleaner.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. I'm looking forward to that. Wow. That's great. That's great. Wow. Well, so I tell you what, let's get into the kabobs um, and the marinade. And if you don't mind, if you'll share with us a marinade recipe of yours, one of your favorites, and then we're going to talk about answering a question from one of our listeners that asked about how to know when vegetables are done, and we're going to talk about your recommendation when it comes to putting everything on the skewers and keeping track of each food. But let's first get into the marinade recipe.
Okay, the marinade recipe for people that aren't really that into making it, simple bottle of Italian salad dressing is a great marinade. You just dump it in the bag, put your stuff in it. It's got your oil in it. It's got citrus in it. It's got usually something tangy, something salty, something sweet. That's as easy as that. I have my marinade is going to be put on the website, but it has soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, juice of a lemon, salt. I don't put any salt in it because there's enough salt in the soy and the Worcestershire to carry that. And if you are vegan, you can actually put in molasses instead of the Worcestershire sauce. Um, because Worcestershire sauce does contain fish sauce and molasses. That's what gives it that very strange taste that really bumps up the game. And then I'll put in any herbs that I want. If I'm putting in dry herbs, I make sure they rehydrate before I rub them on anything or whatever. And I add sugar, and or you can add maple syrup, you can add honey, you could add monk fruit sugar, which is good for diabetics. So anything sweet, tangy, salty, and if you can get that umami flavor in there, you can just the 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 recipe on my website is completely interchangeable. If you're doing something where you want to make something with more of a Mexican theme, switch out the lemon for a lime. I mean, there's if you're doing a seafood, maybe you want to put orange juice in there instead of lemon juice. So it's a pretty generic recipe, but you can get the results you want depending on what you're making.
Yeah. Awesome. And when you marinate, do you marinate in the bags or do you marinate in other containers?
I always marinate in the bags. Some people don't like to use plastic because of,
Mm,
ecology, all that, and I understand that. But for me, it's more than just I don't want to clean a dirty dish. It's about being able to seal the bag shut and then being able to turn the food and run it. My hands can now touch the food inside the bag without getting dirty, and I can make sure that it's getting coated all over the place. And
yeah.
I marinate for at least 2 hours and sometimes up to overnight with that. But that way you can flip it, you can turn it, you can manipulate the food in there tactily, where you can't do that if it's in a dish with a lid.
Right. Right. And along with that, all right, so with the marinade, and this is going to get into the skewers because a lot of folks, when they're getting ready to marinate their food, they do all the prep. They get all their vegetables cut, they get all their meat cut, and then they're going to throw that all into the bag and marinate it all together. And then when they pull it out, what you see so often is everyone puts they alternate everything on the skewers, right? So they're going to put on a green pepper, a piece of chicken. They're going to put on an onion. Then they're going to put on a piece of pineapple, and then a cherry tomato, and they're going to alternate, right? They're going to create some kind of pattern on there. That's what they're going to do. You do things a little different.
I do. Those are very pretty. That's a beautiful presentation for your guests. I mean, it feels very special to get your own skewer in whatever. But there's so much variation in how long foods need to cook. It depends on how hot your grill is. It depends on if it's poultry versus, some type of a steak. Um,
Or shrimp.
Shrimp,
Yep.
yeah, you'll shrimp, scallions, and pineapple and cherry tomatoes make a beautiful one with a teriyaki kind of marinade, but they cook in like minutes. If I put my shrimp on with a hunk of red onion, if I'm going to grill those, that shrimp is going to be dead long before that onion even thinks about getting tender. So what I do is to keep it easier and more predictable, I put all my mushrooms on one. I clean them, marinate them, and then I'll put them all on one skewer. My cherry tomatoes will go on another skewer. My onions will go on another. Steak chunks will go on another. And that way I can really control what's happening. It doesn't give you that same presentation, but I just feel like I can keep things safer and taste better with my guests because you're going to eat them. We take them off before you eat it
Yeah,
anyway. So
yeah,
most
that's right.
people just take it all of it off the one. This time they'd just be grabbing one off here, one off here, one off here,
Mhm.
and it ends up being really good.
Yeah. Now, what about when you do the marinade? Do you throw them all in the same bag when you marinate?
You can, you
Yeah.
can, but then you're going to want to sort them out. It'll take you forever
Yeah, yeah,
to,
yeah.
to get them on the things, but you can
Yeah.
either do them in separate bags. But the other thing I'd like to say is you don't want to marinate meat and vegetables together. If you're just doing vegetables, you can reuse that as a dressing or put more vegetables in it. But if you have it with a raw protein of any kind, fish or whatever, you're gonna have to dispose of the marinade after you pull them out.
Yeah, right. And you mentioned dressings, Caesar dressing and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's when you go and you look at a lot of wild game like duck or goose or turkey or some things, a lot of things that you'll find online out there. That's probably one of the most popular marinades I think people use.
The
Is
Italian,
some type of Italian dressing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they use some type of Italian dressing, and it definitely works. But I really like. I'm with you. I usually do equal parts of the soy and Worcestershire, and then some folks will add either pineapple juice, but you add pineapples themselves, which I love also. But you talk about knowing when things are done because everything gets done so much quicker or takes longer depending on what it is. So some of the things that take longer, for example, you said your red onions.
Hmm.
What else when it comes in the vegetable realm? If you had to separate them into quick cooking and longer cooking, Can you kind of give us a rundown of that?
Yeah, it kind of depends on, well, onions are generally, it depends on how thick you cut them. Are you
Hmm.
wedging them or whatever? But onions take a longer time than pretty much any other vegetable to cook. Peppers take a bit of time for them to be able to get as tender as you want to get them. Zucchini, summer squash, it depends again how thick you've cut them and how you've skewered them. One of my favorite things to do is to get the little skinny zucchinis and then cut them into coins that are pretty thick, about, I'd say, about a third or a half an inch thick. And then I lay them on their sides. So now they look like quarters all lined up next to each other, touching each other, and run the skewer through them flat. And so that way you've got all that much more surface area. They're full of liquid, and part of the whole barbecuing thing is to get that liquid to dry out a little bit so you can get some char on it. And now you've got all this more surface area. And then when you flip them over, so they're going to lose their moisture quicker. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but you'll save some of it. So that's another real good way to up your game.
Right.
I want to talk about one other thing that I that will up your grilling game. It is so fancy. Is a grilled Caesar salad. What you
Mm.
do is you take hearts of romaine. You want to have the whole lettuce, so they're kind of elongated. It's not like a iceberg lettuce. It's not round like a ball. It's going to be elongated, and you cut it through the core, cut it in half. So what was once more of an oval shape, now you've got a flat side on each of them, and you've got two of them. And if you're doing it for a main course, you want to give each person their own half. But if you're doing it for like a side dish, you might quarter those, cut them in half again, but
Hmm.
making sure that you're keeping that core in the center of each of them, it being part of the cut, because that's what's going to hold all the leaves together. And then you brush it with oil. I like to use avocado oil because it's got a higher smoking point than olive oil, and it's not as expensive, and you're not going to taste it once you're barbecuing it.
Yeah.
So just go with that. Some or vegetable oil is fine too. And I just brush that on there and salt and pepper it, and then you put it on a hot grill. You only need to cook it for about a minute on each side, and you get that char. But you keep the lettuce refrigerated up until the minute you're going to put it on the grill. And so when you go to eat it, your guests, you grill it on both sides, you put it on their plate. It's still cold in the middle, but you're getting that char, you're getting that crisp, and then you put Caesar dressing on it. You put Parmesan cheese on it. You can put pancetta that you've roasted in the oven or bacon bits. It is fabulous, and everybody gets their own little plank of lettuce. It's a
Wow. Yeah.
really easy, and you can grill your lemons, rub them in with a little bit of
Hmm.
sugar because that helps the caramelization, and grill those. And you put that as a garnish, and they can squeeze it on it. It really is a great grilling option that most people haven't tried.
Right. Yeah, I haven't. And you you got me wanting to though. That sounds great. Yeah, we've done some wilted lettuce like in a pan, but
Hmm.
it's not been like you said, keeping it all together. It's just kind of, wilting it in some bacon grease or something.
Hmm.
Or just pouring bacon grease over it just a little bit to
Oh yeah,
kind of
yeah.
wilt it up. Yeah, we've done something like that, but no, I like that. I like that with the grill. And my mind actually, I'm like, I got to refocus here on the podcast because my mind's racing on everything else I want to do. I'm thinking about putting the shrimp on there, and wow, yeah, that's
Yeah, grilled chicken would go really well with
yes,
the
it would.
grilled romaine lettuce. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, real quick, like you had mentioned the different meats too, like shrimp, any seafood, fish, those things are going to go cook really fast. Chicken is probably going to take the longest of all the meats, more than likely. But again, you make a good point because the being consistent, and this is where your knife skills are going to come in, because you want to be as consistent as possible in the size of each piece that you're cooking on the same skewer, because when one piece is really huge and one piece is really small, one piece will either get way overdone and the other piece is not done at all, or just going to be so much inconsistency. It's just not going to be a very pleasant eating experience. Is there any skills, and I know I didn't prep you for this. I'm sorry. But
You're good.
in
I'm
knife
ready.
skills, right? When it comes to a knife skill and cutting up, let's say a bell pepper, right? And getting the sizes the same as much as possible. Can you walk through holding the knife or a good method for being able to cut a bell pepper?
Yeah, good question. And I'm going to keep the focus on for grilling, not for a salad, but for grilling.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I would advocate that if you are new to cutting or you're trying a new method of cutting, is to wear a cut glove on your hand. And it's a thin glove that is cut proof. You can put that glove on, you can run a knife back and forth on your palm, and it can't cut through the threads. So, I definitely recommend you get a cut glove. And the other thing we have is a slicing guide. And what it is, it's like, I want to say almost like it's got a handle, and then it's got, I think, like 10 or 11 long rods coming out of it. So it kind of looks like a hoe, for hoeing the
Mhm.
ground. Just got the prongs sticking down, but they're evenly spaced. So if you're cutting, you want to cut a zucchini and you want to make sure those coins get as close as possible. You could, if you want them real thin, you put the zucchini down in front of you. You put the slicing guide through the zucchini. So it's kind of like a comb looking down. Those teeth are in the zucchini. And then you can just take your knife and guide it through the guides one by one. And there's not going to be a lot of variation. And if you want it thicker, you could go every other tooth of that comb is
Yeah.
how I'm going to call it. And so that's a good way. But in general, first of all, wear a cut glove. I highly recommend it. And when you're holding a knife, and I have only three knives that I generally use, and one is a chef knife, and one is a paring knife, and the other is a serrated bread knife. I couldn't get along without those three.
Yeah.
So when I'm holding the other thing, I use scissors for so much in the
Right.
kitchen.
Yeah.
A good pair of kitchen scissors, they'll unhook so you can clean them and sharpen them. It's you really need those too. But if you can't do it with scissors, what you do is you want to hold with your three fingers are holding the handle of the knife. So now you've still got your index finger and your thumb. And you don't want to be pointing with your index finger. You want to pinch the base of where the steel meets the handle of the knife. You pinch it. And that's the way you want to hold your knife, because otherwise, if your hands get slippery, you're working with oil or whatever, the knife can turn in your hand. But if you're pinching it, now you've got two points of contact that are keeping it. Plus, if you're cutting a lot, when I was in culinary school, one of the chefs says people got carpal tunnel syndrome from holding their index finger out. It's this way is much more natural, and you have so much more control. And then you just push through the food. I never come from straight up and then blindly go down. I always have the base of the knife, and then I just push through it, kind of like I want to say like a rocking motion, like a
Yeah.
U, and then I pick it up and do another U. Yeah, the knife blade is close to the food before I even start cutting. I just want to make sure I have it in control. And at some point in time, that motion becomes, I'm not saying I don't think about it, because I do. I always think about it. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where I can, watch TV or listen to the radio and do this. I'm focusing on it, but it becomes part, just like keyboarding or anything
Yeah.
like that. The more you do it, the more your body kind of knows what it needs to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's great. I mean, those guides are awesome. A sharp knife is imperative. You got, that's a sharp knife is a safe knife, as we often say on the program. But knowing how to hold it and going through the proper motion is really key in making sure that not only cuts are uniform, but that'll help with your cook as a whole as well. So I think that's great. That's great.
Yep.
So,
Consistency is important for consistent cooking times. It's
yeah.
got to be predictable for us. It's hard for us to pivot if we can't touch something that's very hot or something like that. It's hard to pivot. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure everything's right before you.
So one more thing before we go for today's program, because I already know I'm probably going to get some more questions on this if we don't try to address it. And this is going to be a little bit more difficult. I'm really going to test you here. When it comes to chicken, when it comes to beef, when it comes to pork, there's a set temp for the most part. There's a slight variation, right? When it comes to a baked potato, right? They recommend like search for a 208 to 210 internal temp for a nice baked potato. But when it comes to cooking the pineapple as opposed to a green bell pepper, right? If you're blind or visually impaired, what indication, what are you doing? Is there a feel? Because I don't know of a temp to look for on those types of things.
Yeah, I don't think temp is going to help you on
Right.
that, but knowledge will help you. So like pineapple is very acidic. In fact, you don't really want to marinate chicken in it. It'll if you leave it overnight, chicken in pineapple juice, it'll completely destroy the chicken.
Yeah.
It's a tenderizer. So, but it's also full of sugar. So it cooks extremely fast. It's very easy. I would never put pineapple and bell peppers on it. But in terms of checking for doneness, I agree with you. Temp won't work. It's imperative for cooking poultry and stuff like that. But you can have medium rare salmon. You can have medium rare meat. There's a whole range. But with fork tender is what I generally do. Is if it's still on the skewer, I can pull the skewer off for a second, and then I'll poke it with a fork, just like I do a potato. If I'm making mashed potatoes, I'll pull one out of the water with my spider, and then poke it with a fork. And if it's tender, then I'll go ahead and eat it. And a lot of this has to do with preference.
That's right. Yeah.
Without a doubt. Nobody wants a mashed potato that's still not cooked all the way
That's
through.
right.
But some people want their bell peppers cooked super soft, and other people like to have a little chew to it. I'm in the latter class there. So there's no right answer, but the whole idea is to keep checking. I'm not a big fan of closing the grill unless I'm smoking something, because then you're kind of steaming the food as a rule. And I don't want to be steaming it, because now you've got a closed environment. It depends on how hot it is and stuff too. So there's no quick cut and dry answer. How hot is your grill? How thick is the chunk of fruit or vegetable you've got on it? It's variable, and it's trial and error. You learn to do it until you figure out a way that you like it.
That's
It's
right.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more you do it, the more you get to eat.
Good point.
That's right. And you'll probably find somebody who I like it this way, and somebody else will be like, no, I like it the other way. And then you're going to be right back where you were to begin with. How do I know when it's like, well, who are you cooking for? I guess it's where it's going to come down to.
It's
Awesome.
true. And smell is a huge
That's
indicator
right.
too. Of course, we all know when our toast is burning. That's a very distinct
That's right.
smell. And food, the food talks to you, to not only you being able to hear it, but also being able to smell it. So you can, but you aren't going to know that the first time you go to bake a cake. What it's going to smell like when it's done.
Yeah.
But by the time you bake your 10th cake, it's going to oh, it's nearly done.
Yeah.
I can tell. Yeah.
And
it's the same thing with grilling.
you do it enough, like sautéing onions. You do it enough, and you'll get to know the feel of when they've become transparent. Even though you can't tell or you can't see, there is a feel as they begin to soften, and they get that kind of that transparency to them. I think there's a feel to it as well that you learn.
I agree.
So
They go in very stiff rings or whatever, and they at some point they let that stuff, the moisture go, and they just become much softer and translucent, like you said. You just know it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, Deborah, thanks so much for coming back on the Blind Grilling Experience and talking about the website and things. Why don't you let us know again what the website is and how to get in touch with you or place any orders?
Sure. It's theblindkitchen.com. Be sure to put in the word "the," or it's going to send you to a whole different site that's not me. And you can either go on the website and submit a communication form, or if you want to give me a call, I can help you place orders or answer some of your questions. And I'm at 503-313-2345. I'm in Portland, Oregon. We're completely web-based, and just go to the website and look at all the different video tutorials that tell you what the tools are, what they do, why they're blind friendly, and how to use and care for them. And they all come packaged in labels that are large print and braille. So it's a very accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's great. It's always good to receive a package in the mail. Everybody likes that. Everybody
Yeah,
likes it.
exactly. And you know what? And receiving one in Braille, I always
Oh
feel
yeah.
like, "Oh, man,"
Yeah,
because you
that's
get
great.
so few packages like that.
You're right, right. Yeah, you know exactly what it is. Yep. As
Yep,
soon as you
yep.
open it. That's awesome. All right. Well, folks, we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening to the Blind
Friends and
Grilling
family
Experience.
gather
We
round and fire
hope you
up
guys
the
will share out the episode and go and check out theblindkitchen.com and all the things that she has on there on that website. Again, they got the heat-resistant gloves. They've got the talking thermometer. They've got the skewers that are awesome. Just a great collection for both the kitchen and the grill. So go and check it out. And check out our new website, blindgrilling.com. And until next time, remember, folks, if you're looking, you ain't cooking.
Keeps turning, don't worry what you gotta do. Cause if you're looking, you ain't cooking. Fire up the barbecue. Fire up the barbecue.